Jesse Carter was a man of the earth. His days dictated by the sun's rise and fall, the needs of his cattle, and the relentless rhythm of the sprawling Montana plains. His ranch, a modest but sturdy collection of buildings nestled in a secluded valley, was his entire world, a sanctuary of hard-won peace he had meticulously built from the ground up after years of drifting. He valued quiet above all else. The vast expanse of the landscape, a reflection of the unburdened space he cultivated within himself. He was known in the sparse, scattered settlements for his fair dealings, his unwavering integrity, and his fierce independence. He rarely sought company, preferring the solitude of his own thoughts and the loyal companionship of his grizzled ranch dog Buster, who was currently dozing contentedly by the dying embers of the morning fire. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The autumn wind, sharp and unforgiving, whistled through the gaps in the barn walls, carrying with it the scent of pine and approaching snow. Jesse was meticulously mending a broken saddle strap, his strong, calloused fingers working with practiced ease, the leather creaking softly under his ministrations. The rhythmic sound was a familiar comfort, a part of the predictable routine that governed his existence. He wasn't a man who sought adventure or entanglement, preferring the straightforward challenges of ranching to the unpredictable complexities of human drama. Then, a sudden thud, distinct from the usual creaks and groans of the old barn, echoed from the far corner. Buster, who had been resting nearby, lifted his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his ears swiveling towards the sound. Jesse's hand instinctively went to the worn pistol holstered at his hip, a silent guardian against the sparse dangers of the wilderness. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his boots barely scuffing the straw-strewn floor, his senses alert. Crouched in the shadowed space between a stack of hay bales and the far wall, a figure was huddled, almost camouflaged by the dim light and the scattered straw. It was a woman, her face obscured by a thick, dark shawl pulled low over her brow. She was trembling, a subtle tremor that seemed to emanate from deep within her. What struck Jesse immediately, though, was the pronounced curve of her midsection, clearly visible beneath her faded, worn dress. She was pregnant, unmistakably so, and desperately trying to remain hidden. Buster let out another low growl, a warning. The woman flinched, pressing herself further into the hay. "Please," she whispered, her voice a raw, strained gasp. Don't hurt me." Jesse slowly lowered his hand from his pistol, his eyes narrowing, taking in her disheveled appearance, the fear etched onto her visible features. He saw not a threat, but a profound vulnerability. This wasn't a bandit. This was someone on the run, and deeply afraid. "Who are you?" Jesse asked, his voice a low rumble, intentionally devoid of threat. "What are you doing in my barn?" She hesitated, her eyes, a startling shade of green, darting nervously around the cavernous space before settling on his face. He saw desperation in their depths, a wild, cornered look that stirred something unexpected within him. "My name is Eliza," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Eliza Monroe." She paused, then, as if compelled by an unseen force, added, "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." As if to punctuate her plea, a sharp pain visibly rippled through her, and she gasped, clutching her swollen belly. She leaned her head back against the hay, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Jesse saw the clear signs of distress, the palpable discomfort of late pregnancy compounded by exhaustion and fear. He wasn't a doctor, but he recognized a woman in dire need. "You're in labor?" he asked, a jolt of alarm going through him. She shook her head, weakly. "No, not yet. Just tired. And cold. I've been walking for days." Jesse surveyed her, his usual cautious nature warring with a deep-seated instinct to offer aid. He was a man who lived by a code, and that code included helping those in true distress, regardless of the circumstances. He thought of his own mother, a kind woman who had always taught him the importance of compassion. Besides, she was pregnant. He couldn't turn her away. "All right, Eliza Monroe," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Come on! You can't stay out here. You need warmth and food." He reached out a hand, his large palm calloused but steady. She looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face, her eyes searching for any sign of deception or malice. After a long moment of hesitation, she slowly, tentatively, reached out and took it. Her hand was surprisingly cold, small, and fragile in his. He helped her up, careful to support her weight, and led her slowly out of the barn towards his small, sturdy cabin, Buster trotting faithfully at their heels. Inside, the cabin was spartan but clean, the air warm from the stone fireplace. Jesse settled Eliza onto his worn but comfortable armchair by the hearth, the warmth immediately bringing a faint flush to her pale cheeks. Buster, surprisingly gentle, nudged her hand with his nose, sensing her vulnerability. "I'll get you some water and something to eat," Jesse said, moving towards the small kitchen area. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." As he brewed strong coffee and heated a pot of hearty stew, he felt her green eyes on him, watchful, wary, but no longer filled with the raw, desperate fear he had first seen. He knew he had stepped into something far more complicated than a simple act of charity. Her presence in his isolated home was a gamble, a direct challenge to the quiet life he cherished. But looking at her, seeing the profound exhaustion and the palpable vulnerability of her condition, he knew he had made the only choice he could. He wouldn't turn her away. He was a man who didn't stick his nose in trouble, but sometimes, trouble, with a swollen belly and a haunted gaze, simply walked into your barn, and you had to decide what kind of man you truly were. As the stew simmered and the scent of warmth filled the cabin, Eliza finally spoke again, her voice still weak but with a new tremor of urgency. You don't know who I am, do you?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. Jesse turned from the stove, a wooden spoon in his hand. "Only what you told me," he replied simply. "Eliza Monroe. Needing help." She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to her hands, which she clasped tightly in her lap. "There's a bounty on my head," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "For murder. They say I killed my husband." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, slicing through the comforting warmth of the cabin. Jesse felt a jolt, not of fear for himself, but of understanding the immense weight she carried. A bounty. That changed everything. He looked at her, at the swollen belly, at the fear that had momentarily returned to her eyes, and a quiet anger began to stir within him. He was a man who believed in justice, in right and wrong, and something about her story, about her desperate flight, didn't sit right with him. He was a cowboy, not a lawman, and certainly not a judge, but he saw a woman, clearly in distress, carrying a child, confessing to a grave accusation. He looked at her closely, searching for any hint of deceit, of the coldness he would expect from someone capable of murder. He saw only profound weariness, a deep sorrow, and an undeniable fragility. "Did you?" he asked, his voice low, his gaze unwavering, cutting through the silence. Eliza flinched, as if struck. She lifted her head, her green eyes meeting his, and for the first time, he saw a spark of defiance, a fierce, protective fire within her. "No," she stated, her voice clear and strong, though still quiet. "I didn't. He was a cruel man, Jesse. Abusive. But I didn't kill him. I ran from him, and when I heard he was dead, and they were blaming me, I ran faster." Jesse listened, his mind sifting through her words. He knew the world was rarely black and white, especially in these harsh, untamed lands. Stories twisted, truths were distorted, and justice was often blind. He looked at the stark desperation in her eyes, the raw honesty in her voice, and a deep-seated conviction settled within him. He believed her. And in that moment, his choice was made. He wouldn't turn her in. Not now, not with a baby on the way, not with such a harrowing story clinging to her like dust. "All right, Eliza," he said, his voice calm, reassuring. "You're safe here. No one knows you're here. And I'm not turning you over to anyone." Her eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief, then profound relief washing over her face. A single tear tracked a path down her dust-smudged cheek. "Why?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Jesse looked at her, then out the window at the endless plains, already starting to glow with the first light of dawn. "Because you're pregnant, and you're in trouble," he stated simply, his voice firm. "And because it doesn't feel right to let a woman and her child be hunted down without a fair chance." He was a man of principles, and those principles often superseded the letter of the law, especially when the law seemed to have lost its way. He served her the stew, warm and nourishing. Eliza ate slowly at first, then with a growing hunger, as if she hadn't had a proper meal in days, which was likely true. Jessie sat across from her, quietly observing, allowing her the space to eat and recover. He noticed the faint scars on her wrists, almost hidden by the sleeves of her dress, and a subtle flinch when a log shifted loudly in the fireplace. These were not the marks of a killer, but of a victim, of someone who had suffered. His resolve solidified. He showed her to the small guest room, a simple but clean space he rarely used. "You can rest here," he said, gesturing to the bed. "No one will bother you." "Thank you, Jessie," she said, her voice barely audible, thick with exhaustion and gratitude. "Thank you." As he watched her disappear into the room, closing the door softly behind her, Jessie felt the weight of his decision settle upon him. He had taken on a dangerous secret, one that could cost him everything: his ranch, his reputation, his freedom. But looking at the closed door, knowing she and the unborn child were safe within his walls, a strange sense of purpose settled over him, a quiet conviction that he had done the right thing, the human thing. The quiet of his cabin, once a sanctuary of solitude, now hummed with the silent tension of a hidden life, a secret he would guard with fierce determination. He knew, with a certainty that reached into his very bones, that his life would never be the same. The trouble he had always avoided had finally found him, and against all logic, he was choosing to embrace it. The days that followed were a delicate dance of caution and quiet adjustment. Eliza, exhausted and weary, spent most of the first few days resting, the deep sleep of someone who had been running for far too long. Jessie moved around the cabin with a newfound quietness, his usual robust movements softened to avoid startling her. He brought her simple, nourishing meals, water, and warm coffee, always leaving them just inside her door, giving her the space she clearly needed. Buster, ever watchful, often lay curled outside her room, a furry sentinel, his presence a comforting reassurance. Slowly, tentatively, Eliza began to emerge from the cocoon of fear and exhaustion. Her initial wariness of Jessie gradually began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile trust. She would join him for meals, initially sitting in silence, then offering hesitant questions about the ranch, the animals, the rhythm of his life. Jessie, a man of few words, found himself explaining the intricacies of cattle drives, the challenges of weather, the stubborn beauty of the Montana land. He spoke of his family, long gone, and the solitary life he had built, never once pressing her for more details about her own past, beyond what she had already revealed. He noticed the subtle changes in her. The dark circles under her eyes began to fade, replaced by a healthier glow. The haunted look in her green eyes softened, though a lingering sadness remained. She began to move with more ease, though the burden of her advanced pregnancy was evident in every careful step. He saw her gently touch her swollen belly, a protective gesture that spoke volumes of her devotion to the life she carried. One afternoon, as Jessie was patching a leak in the cabin roof, he saw Eliza standing by the corral, watching him work. She was holding her belly, a pensive expression on her face. When he climbed down, dusty and tired, she met his gaze. "Jessie," she began, her voice soft. I need to tell you more. You're risking so much for me. You deserve to know." He nodded, leaning against the fence post, his arms crossed. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the vast, peaceful landscape. "My husband, Victor. He was a gambler, a drinker, and he was cruel, the kind of cruel that leaves bruises you can't see." Her voice was barely a whisper now, raw with remembered pain. "He had debts, big ones. One night, a man came to the house, demanding payment. Victor was drunk. They argued. There was a struggle. I heard a shot. When I came into the room, Victor was on the floor, dead. And the man, he was gone. I panicked. I just ran. I didn't think about anything except getting away, getting this baby away from all of it. She looked at him, her eyes pleading for understanding. They found Victor. And because I was gone, because I was the only one there, they put the blame on me, said I fled justice. Jesse's jaw tightened. The pieces of her story fit, painting a picture of desperate flight rather than cold-blooded murder. He saw the genuine anguish in her eyes, the palpable trauma. "You believe me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I do, Eliza," Jesse said, his voice firm, unwavering. "I believe you." His conviction was not based on flimsy evidence, but on the raw honesty he saw in her eyes, the desperation that had driven her to his doorstep. He was a man who trusted his instincts, and his instincts told him she was telling the truth. A wave of relief washed over her, so profound it almost brought her to her knees. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Jesse. You have no idea what that means to me." "It means you're safe here," he reiterated, his gaze steady. "For as long as you need. No one will find you." He didn't just offer shelter, he offered sanctuary, a promise carved from his quiet determination. Their days developed a quiet rhythm. Eliza, despite her condition, insisted on helping with chores, anything she could manage. She folded laundry, mended torn clothing, and even began to organize Jesse's notoriously cluttered pantry. Her presence brought a subtle warmth to the cabin, a feminine touch that had been absent for too long. Jesse found himself looking forward to her quiet companionship, to the gentle hum of her presence as she went about her tasks. He caught himself smiling more often, a rare occurrence for the reclusive cowboy. He also found himself becoming increasingly protective. He would ride the perimeter of his ranch more frequently, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of unwelcome visitors. He kept his rifle within easy reach, his senses attuned to every unusual sound. The bounty posters, he knew, would be widespread, portraying her as a dangerous killer. The risk was immense, but he had committed, and Jesse Carter was a man who stood by his word. As Eliza's due date loomed closer, a new kind of tension entered the cabin, a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Jesse, who had only ever dealt with the birth of calves, found himself reading through dusty old medical books he'd inherited from his grandmother, trying to prepare for the inevitable. He stocked up on clean linens, boiled water, and gathered a small collection of medical supplies from his emergency kit. He felt a profound sense of responsibility for both Eliza and the unborn child, a life he had chosen to protect, sight unseen. One blustery evening, as a fierce autumn storm raged outside, rattling the cabin windows, Eliza's labor began. It was sudden, intense, and terrifying. Jesse found her doubled over in her room, clutching her belly, her face contorted in pain. "Jesse!" she gasped, her voice strained. "It's time. The baby's coming." A surge of adrenaline coursed through him, sharp and immediate. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his years of responding to ranch emergencies kicking in. He stoked the fire to a roaring blaze, boiled more water, and laid out the clean cloths. He spoke to her in low, reassuring tones, his large hand gently stroking her brow as she groaned through another contraction. "You're doing great, Eliza," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Just breathe. I'm right here." The hours that followed were a blur of intense focus, of whispered encouragement and shared pain. Eliza was incredibly strong, her quiet resilience shining through the waves of agony. She gripped his hand, her nails digging into his palm, but he barely noticed the pain. His focus was entirely on her labored breathing, on the profound act of creation unfolding before him. He wiped her brow, offered her sips of water, and held her hand, his presence a steady anchor in her storm of pain. As the first light of dawn began to paint the distant peaks with bruised purples and grays, a new sound filled the cabin, piercing the quiet stillness and filling the air with pure, unadulterated joy. It was the cry of a newborn baby, loud and clear, a testament to life's enduring power. Jesse felt a wave of dizzying relief, so potent it almost brought him to his knees. He carefully caught the tiny, squirming form, his hands, usually so accustomed to the rough hide of cattle, now cradling something impossibly small and fragile. He looked at Eliza, her face pale and exhausted but alight with an ethereal glow, and then back at the baby, a tiny girl, pink and perfect, her eyes squeezed shut as she let out another indignant cry. "A girl," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, a profound tenderness welling up inside him. "Eliza, it's a girl." He gently placed the baby on Eliza's chest and watched as she, with trembling hands, reached out and touched her daughter's soft skin. Tears streamed freely down her face, tears of exhaustion, of relief, of overwhelming love. Buster, who had been whining anxiously by the side of the bed, nudged his head against Eliza's hand, then let out a soft whimper of approval. "My daughter," Eliza whispered, her voice choked with emotion, her fingers tracing the tiny features of her newborn. "She's beautiful, Jesse. She's so beautiful." In that moment, Jesse realized that his world had not just expanded, it had been irrevocably transformed. He was no longer just Jesse Carter, the solitary rancher. He was a man who had helped bring a new life into the world, a man who held a profound connection to the mother and child before him. He felt a fierce, protective love swell within him, a love that encompassed both Eliza and their tiny daughter. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he wanted to be a part of their lives, not just as a temporary savior, but as a permanent fixture, a father, a partner. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking Eliza's hand in his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "What are you going to name her?" he asked, his voice soft. Eliza looked at the baby, then at Jesse, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Hope," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "Because she's our hope. She's the start of everything new." Hope. The name resonated with Jesse, a powerful symbol of their journey, of the future they were building together. He nodded, a silent agreement, his heart full. The storm outside had passed, but within the cabin, a new kind of peace had settled, one born not of solitude, but of shared vulnerability and the blossoming of an unexpected love. He had risked everything, and in return, he had found something far more precious than his quiet life: a family. The days and weeks that followed Hope's birth were a blur of exhaustion, wonder, and a profound, exhilarating shift in Jesse's solitary world. The cabin, once filled with the comfortable silence of his own thoughts, now echoed with the soft coos of a newborn, the gentle creak of a rocking chair, and Eliza's hushed lullabies. Jesse, the rugged cowboy who had never cradled anything smaller than a newborn calf, found himself navigating the delicate art of swaddling, changing diapers with surprising dexterity, and soothing Hope with a deep, rumbling hum that seemed to calm her instantly. He spent hours simply watching her sleep, marveling at the delicate perfection of her tiny hands and feet, the faint fuzz of hair on her head. Eliza, though still recovering from the ordeal of labor and the lingering fear of discovery, bloomed into motherhood. The deep-seated weariness that had marked her face gradually lifted, replaced by a radiant glow of maternal love. Her eyes, once haunted, now shone with a fierce protectiveness for her daughter. She found a quiet strength in her new role, a determination to provide Hope with a life free from fear and shadows. She spoke often of her dreams for Hope, of raising her in a safe, loving environment, a stark contrast to the tumultuous life she herself had known. Jesse listened, his heart swelling with a quiet resolve to make those dreams a reality. Their relationship deepened beyond the shared experience of Hope's birth. The intimacy born of crisis matured into a profound affection, a quiet understanding that permeated their daily lives. They shared the late-night feedings, the moments of shared exhaustion, and the boundless joy of Hope's every new milestone. Jesse found himself sharing stories of his childhood, of his parents, and the values they instilled, opening parts of himself he had kept guarded for years. Eliza, in turn, recounted tales of her own younger days, before the shadow of her husband fell over her, painting vivid pictures of a vibrant, spirited girl who had once dreamed of a life filled with laughter and art. The constant thread of discovery, though ever present in their minds, became a backdrop rather than the main focus. Jesse meticulously planned his trips to town, always watchful, always cautious. He developed a network of subtle communication with a few trusted, taciturn individuals, exchanging glances and coded words that conveyed far more than their simple meanings. He trusted his instincts, honed over years of living on the edge of the wilderness, to warn him of any approaching danger. One afternoon, as Jesse was teaching Eliza how to properly saddle a horse, their hands brushing as he adjusted the cinch, she looked up at him, her green eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. "Jesse," she began, her voice soft, "I don't know how I can ever repay you. You've given me so much. You've saved me. And hope." He paused, letting his hand linger on hers. "You don't owe me anything, Eliza," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You gave me something too. Something I didn't even know I was missing." He looked at her, then glanced towards the cabin where Hope was napping. "You gave me a family, a future." His gaze met hers, unwavering. "I've fallen in love with you, Eliza," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "And with Hope. I want to be her father. I want to build a life here, with you. A permanent one." Eliza's eyes widened, a rush of color spreading across her cheeks. A profound silence hung in the air, broken only by the gentle whinny of a horse in the corral. He saw tears welling in her eyes, but they were tears of overwhelming emotion, not sadness. "Oh, Jesse," she whispered, her voice choked. I've fallen in love with you too, more than I ever thought possible. You're the kindest, most honorable man I've ever known." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his cheek. "And Hope already adores you. She lights up every time you walk into a room." He leaned into her touch, a wave of profound relief washing over him. Their lips met then, a tender, hesitant kiss that deepened with unspoken promises. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, a silent vow exchanged under the vast Montana sky. The ranch, once a solitary refuge, was now destined to be their shared home, a haven for the family they would build together. The risk was still there, a faint tremor beneath the surface of their newfound happiness, but it was a risk they would face together, their love a powerful shield against any storm that might come. Life on the ranch took on a new, richer hue. Jesse and Eliza were inseparable, their days filled with the rhythm of ranch work, the joyous chaos of raising Hope, and the quiet contentment of their deepening love. They rarely spoke of their future in grand terms, preferring to build it brick by brick, day by day, knowing that each shared moment, each act of kindness, each quiet understanding was a foundation laid. One afternoon, a few months after Hope's first birthday, Eliza approached Jesse as he was mending a fence. She held a small, weathered, leather-bound book in her hands. "Jesse," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "I've been thinking about my past, about Victor, and about the bounty." He straightened up, his brow furrowed with concern. "What about it?" "I want to clear my name," she stated, her green eyes firm. "Not just for me, but for Hope. I don't want her growing up with a mother who's an outlaw. I want her to be proud of who we are, without shadows hanging over us." Jesse looked at her, his heart filled with admiration for her courage. He knew the risk was immense. To reveal herself, to actively seek justice, meant stepping out of the protective anonymity he had so carefully built around them. "It's dangerous, Eliza," he warned, his voice low. "Very dangerous. They might not believe you. They might just lock you up." "I know," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "But I can't live like this forever. We can't. And I have something that might help." She held up the book. Victor's ledger. He kept meticulous records of his gambling debts, his crooked dealings, and even some of the threats he received. "I found it hidden after he died. I took it with me when I ran, not knowing why, just knowing it was important." Jesse took the ledger, his fingers tracing the worn leather. He opened it, seeing rows of meticulous handwriting, names, dates, amounts. He saw entries detailing dealings with figures known to be unsavory, even outright dangerous. This was more than just a gambler's book. It was a chronicle of a dark, clandestine world, and it might just hold the key to Eliza's vindication. "This changes things," Jesse said, his voice thoughtful. "This could be enough." He looked at her, a fierce determination in his eyes. "But we do this carefully. We do this smart. We don't rush into anything." They spent weeks meticulously poring over the ledger, deciphering its cryptic entries, cross-referencing names and dates with old newspaper clippings Jesse had kept for years, or gleaned from hushed conversations in town. They pieced together a compelling narrative: Victor's escalating debts, his desperate dealings with dangerous criminals, and the increasingly violent threats he received. The ledger painted a picture of a man who had made powerful enemies, enemies far more likely to be responsible for his death than a pregnant, terrified wife. Their plan began to take shape. They couldn't simply walk into a sheriff's office with the ledger. The risk was too great. Instead, they needed an ally, someone respected and impartial, someone who could investigate without immediately alerting the authorities to Eliza's presence. Jesse thought of Brody, the quiet, principled sheriff from a neighboring county, a man known for his unwavering commitment to justice, even if it meant challenging the established narrative. Jesse made the arduous journey to Brody's office alone, carrying the ledger hidden deep within his saddlebag. He sat across from the sheriff, a man whose face was etched with the weariness of years spent upholding the law in a rough land. Jesse laid out the story, carefully, methodically, presenting the ledger as evidence. He didn't reveal Eliza's current location, only that she was safe and willing to testify once her safety could be guaranteed. Brody listened intently, his expression grave, his eyes occasionally flicking to the ledger Jesse had placed on his desk. He was a man of integrity, and he recognized the weight of the evidence before him. The names in the ledger, the patterns of debt and threat, painted a picture of a criminal underworld far more complex than a simple domestic dispute. "This is serious, Jesse," Brody finally said, his voice low. "These names, they're connected to some dangerous folks. But this," he tapped the ledger, "this is compelling. This could clear her. It could also put her in a lot of danger if the wrong people find out she has it." "She knows the risks," Jesse replied, his gaze steady. "She wants her name cleared." "For her daughter." Brody nodded slowly. "All right, give me some time. I'll start digging. Quietly. No one needs to know where this came from or who has it. And tell her she stays hidden. If these men find out she's alive and has this ledger, her life won't be worth a plug nickel." Jesse returned to the ranch, the weight of their secrets still heavy, but now tempered with a new sense of purpose. He told Eliza about his meeting with Brody, about the sheriff's commitment to investigating quietly. A flicker of hope, bright and fragile, shone in Eliza's eyes. They understood the danger, but the possibility of a life free from shadows, a life where Hope would never have to carry the burden of her mother being an outlaw, was a powerful motivator. They settled into a new period of tense waiting, each day a step closer to either vindication or ruin. Weeks bled into months, each passing day a delicate balance between the quiet rhythm of their ranch life and the underlying tension of waiting for news from Sheriff Brody. Eliza and Jesse dedicated themselves to Hope, reveling in her every new word and wobbly step. Hope, now a spirited toddler with a bright, curious mind, filled their cabin with laughter and endless questions. She was their reason, their anchor, and the living embodiment of the future they were fighting for. Eliza, while still watchful, found a growing confidence. She plunged into ranch life with an almost fierce determination, learning to ride with a graceful ease and becoming an invaluable partner to Jesse. She helped with calving, assisted with mending fences, and developed a surprising knack for predicting weather patterns. Her hands, once soft and uncertain, became strong and capable, reflecting the inner fortitude she had cultivated. Jesse watched her with a quiet pride, seeing the vibrant woman she truly was, shedding the layers of fear and past trauma. Sheriff Brody's updates were infrequent, delivered through coded messages or brief, hushed conversations in the nearest town when Jesse made his supply runs. The investigation was slow, meticulous, and dangerous. Brody had quietly followed leads from Victor's ledger, uncovering a complex web of gambling, extortion, and illicit dealings that stretched far beyond their quiet corner of Montana. He had identified the man who had been at Victor's house the night he died, a known criminal named Silas, with a reputation for ruthless violence, and had begun to gather evidence that tied him to the murder. The very nature of Brody's investigation meant that he had to be discreet, working beneath the radar of powerful, dangerous figures. This meant that for Eliza and Jesse, the waiting was often agonizing, punctuated by moments of intense anxiety. Every unfamiliar rider, every distant sound carried the potential for revelation, for their carefully constructed sanctuary to be shattered. Jesse, ever vigilant, increased his patrols around the perimeter of the ranch, his rifle always within reach. He taught Eliza how to shoot, how to load a shotgun, and how to defend herself should the unthinkable happen, though the thought of her facing such a threat sent a cold dread through him. One blustery afternoon, as Jesse was returning from a routine trip to town, a chilling sight stopped him cold. Nailed to the old oak tree that marked the entrance to his property was a wanted poster. But this wasn't just any poster. It was a new one, stark and menacing, with a crudely drawn sketch of Eliza's face, her name, and beneath it, in bold, stark letters, murderer. Bounty increased. What made Jesse's blood run cold was the small, almost invisible red stain in the corner of the poster, the unmistakable mark of the Red Hand Gang, Silas's notorious crew. This wasn't the law looking for Eliza anymore. This was personal. Silas knew, or suspected. The ledger was being felt. Jesse tore the poster down, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. He galloped back to the cabin, the old fear, dormant for so long, now a visceral presence in his gut. He found Eliza inside, humming softly as she braided Hope's hair. She looked up, her smile fading as she saw the grim set of his face, the poster clutched in his hand. "They know," he said, his voice low, his eyes dark with grim determination. "Silas's gang. The Red Hand. They've increased the bounty. They know you have the ledger, or they suspect you do. This isn't about the law anymore, Eliza. This is about them shutting you up." Eliza's face paled, her hand instinctively going to Hope's head. The fear was back, sharp and immediate, but now it was laced with a new kind of resolve. "They won't get me," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Not with Hope here." "No," Jesse agreed, his voice a steel-hard promise. "They won't. We'll fight them." Their sanctuary was no longer impenetrable. The remote location, once their greatest defense, now felt like a trap. Jesse and Eliza began to prepare for the inevitable. They reinforced the cabin doors and windows, boarded up vulnerable spots, and stocked extra provisions. Jesse taught Eliza more about tactical defense, how to move quietly, how to use the terrain to their advantage. They spent hours practicing with their firearms, their movements becoming precise, their aim true. The laughter in the cabin was replaced by a tense quiet, punctuated by the soft click of a rifle being loaded, the muffled thud of a practice shot. Hope, sensing the shift in their mood, became quieter, her bright eyes observing their serious faces with an innocent wisdom beyond her years. A few days later, a rider approached the ranch, his silhouette stark against the setting sun. Jesse, positioned strategically in the barn loft with his rifle, watched an approach. It was Brody, his face grim. "They're coming, Jesse," Brody said, his voice urgent, hushed. "Silas and his men. They hid my office, looking for the ledger. They know I've been asking questions. I'd barely got out. They're on their way here. I tried to warn you sooner, but they cut the wires." Jesse's jaw tightened. "How many?" "At least 5, maybe more. They're desperate. They won't stop until they have Eliza. And the ledger." Brody looked at the reinforced cabin, at Jesse's determined face. "I sent a rider for the federal marshal, but they're days away. You're on your own here." "Then we'll make our stand," Jesse said, his voice unwavering. He turned to Eliza, who had emerged from the cabin, Hope clutched tightly in her arms. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a fierce, unyielding light. "We need to get Hope to safety," Eliza said, her voice trembling slightly. "She can't be here for this." "The old root cellar," Jesse suggested, his mind working quickly. "It's hidden, and it's secure. You take her there, Eliza. You stay with her. No matter what." Eliza looked at him, then at their daughter, then back at him. Her eyes filled with a desperate love and a dawning understanding. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not leaving you. Not now. We face this together. Always." Jesse knew arguing was futile. He saw the resolve in her eyes, the unbreakable strength that had brought her to his doorstep. He wouldn't leave her to face this alone either. "All right," he conceded, his gaze locking with hers. "We fight them together. But you stay close to the cabin. You protect Hope. I'll take the perimeter." Brody, despite his weariness, stood with them. "I'm not leaving you either," he said, his hand resting on his own pistol. "Justice needs to be served. And these men won't get away with this." As night descended, a cold, starless blanket over the Montana hills, a tense silence settled over the ranch. The wind howled, a mournful prelude to the impending storm. The cabin, once a symbol of peace, was now a fortress, manned by a cowboy, an outlaw, and a lawman. United against a common enemy, the greatest risk they had ever taken was about to unfold, a desperate battle for their future, for their family, and for the hope that had been born in the heart of this very home. The stakes, Tia, had never been higher. And Jesse knew, with chilling certainty, that this night would decide everything. The night air hung heavy with a palpable tension, thick and cold, punctuated only by the mournful whistle of the wind through the eaves of the barn. Jesse, Eliza, and Brody positioned themselves strategically, their eyes scanning the ink-black expanse beyond the cabin's immediate clearing. The ranch, usually a place of quiet solitude, had transformed into a silent, watchful fortress. Every shadow a potential threat, every rustle of leaves a possible warning. Hope, nestled safely in a reinforced corner of the cabin with extra blankets and a small, cherished doll, was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside, her innocent breaths a stark contrast to the grim determination etched on her parents' faces. Jesse took up a position in the darkened barn loft, rifle in hand, his gaze sweeping the approach road. His senses heightened. He felt the cold steel of the rifle butt against his shoulder, a familiar weight that brought a strange sense of calm. Eliza, armed with a shotgun, remained inside the cabin, positioned near a fortified window that offered a clear view of the yard, her face a mask of resolute focus. Brody took cover behind a stack of firewood near the front porch, his revolver glinting faintly in the dim starlight, a testament to his unwavering commitment to justice. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an agonizing eternity. The chill deepened, biting at their exposed skin, but none of them moved, their concentration absolute. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the rapid thump of their own hearts and the distant hoot of an owl. Then, a faint shimmer on the horizon, multiple points of light, like distant fireflies, slowly growing larger. Horses, several of them, Silas and his men. "They're here." Jesse's voice was a low, guttural whisper, carried across the short distance between the barn and the cabin. Eliza stiffened, her grip on the shotgun tightening. Brody braced himself, his jaw set. The lights grew steadily closer, then fanned out, surrounding the cabin, their movements practiced, professional. These weren't mere thugs. They were hardened men, accustomed to violence. The deep, menacing voice cut through the stillness, amplified by the night. "Eliza Monroe, we know you're in there, and we know you have what belongs to us. Come out, and no one gets hurt." It was Silas, his voice laced with a dangerous calm. Eliza remained silent, her eyes narrowed, her finger resting on the trigger. Jesse held his breath, waiting. "You can't hide forever, little bird." "Little bird," Silas taunted, his voice closer now. "We're not the law. We don't need warrants. We just need the ledger. And you." A moment of tense silence, then the distinct thud of someone dismounting, followed by the soft crunch of boots on frozen earth. They were moving closer, testing the perimeter. Jesse took aim, his breath held. He saw a shadowy figure attempting to flank the barn, moving stealthily through the darkness. He fired, a single, sharp crack that shattered the night. The figure cried out, stumbling, before retreating into the shadows. Chaos erupted. Gunshots echoed, sharp and immediate, as Silas's men returned fire, their bullets splintering against the barn. Cabin walls. Eliza, with precise aim, fired her shotgun, the powerful blast ripping through the night, sending one of the attacking figures sprawling. Brody, a seasoned lawman, returned fire with calculated precision, his revolver spitting flames in the darkness. The battle raged, a brutal symphony of gunfire, shouts, and the thud of bodies. Jesse moved with deadly efficiency, his rifle spitting lead from his vantage point, picking off rural targets, disrupting their organized attack. He was a rancher, not a soldier, but years of hunting and defending his land had forged him into a formidable opponent. He was fighting for his family, for their future, and that gave him a strength he hadn't known he possessed. Inside, Eliza moved like a phantom, shifting from window to window, her shotgun a deadly extension of her will. She was no stranger to violence, but this was different. This was not the chaotic abuse of her past. This was a calculated fight for survival, for her daughter's safety. She was terrified, but the thought of hope, sleeping innocently just steps away, fueled her courage. She saw the flash of a shotgun barrel, aimed for the door, and fired, sending the assailant reeling. Brody, despite being outnumbered, fought with grim determination, his years of experience evident in his tactical movements. He kept the attackers at bay, his shots precise, aimed to disable rather than kill, buying precious time. The fight seemed endless, a primal struggle against overwhelming odds. Jesse felt a searing pain in his shoulder, a bullet tearing through flesh, but he barely registered it. His mind was focused, his resolve absolute. He continued to fire, his vision blurred by pain and adrenaline. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the barn. Silas's men had used dynamite, aiming to destroy the stable and flush Jesse out. Flames erupted, licking at the wooden structure, casting grotesque, dancing shadows across the snowy ground. The heat was immediate, intense. "Jesse!" Eliza screamed from the cabin, her voice filled with terror. "I'm all right," he yelled back, coughing as smoke filled his lungs. He had to get out, but he also had to stop Silas. He saw a brief opening, a chance to outflank the remaining attackers who were distracted by the fire. He swung down from the loft, landing with a grunt, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He moved silently through the smoke and shadows, a wraith in the chaos. He saw Silas, a hulking figure, attempting to gain entry through the cabin's rear door, trying to get to Eliza and the ledger. "Silas!" Jesse roared, his voice raw, drawing the outlaw's attention. Silas whirled around, surprised. He raised his pistol, but Jesse was faster. He fired, a single, decisive shot. Silas staggered, a look of disbelief on his face, before collapsing to the ground, motionless. With their leader down, the remaining outlaws, disorganized and demoralized by the unexpected resistance, began to scatter, disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of smoke and silence. The immediate threat was gone, but the barn was ablaze, the flames casting an eerie, triumphant glow over the new silent ranch. Jesse staggered towards the cabin, his shoulder throbbing, the exhaustion finally catching up to him. Eliza rushed out, her shotgun still in hand, her eyes wide with fear and relief. She saw the blood staining his shoulder, the grim set of his jaw. "Jesse!" she cried, rushing to him, her hands going to his wound. "I'm all right," he rasped. "Just a scratch." "Silas is down." "They're gone." Brody emerged from his cover, his face smudged with soot, his breathing ragged. He nodded at Jesse, a silent acknowledgement of their victory. "It's over," he said, his voice hoarse. "They won't be back." As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, bathing the devastated barn in a melancholic light, the federal marshals arrived, their horses galloping into the yard, alerted by Brody's earlier messenger. They found Brody, a lawman upholding his duty, and Jesse, a rancher who had protected his home and his family, standing side by side with Eliza, who held their sleeping daughter, Hope, close. Brody quickly explained the situation, the details of Silas's gang, the ledger, and Eliza's true innocence. The marshals, witnessing the scene, the burning barn, the fallen outlaw, and the clear evidence of a fierce struggle, listened with grim understanding. Eliza, holding Hope, approached the lead marshal, her voice clear and steady, as she finally, fully, told her story, presenting Victor's ledger as the undeniable proof of her innocence. The marshals, after careful examination of the ledger and a thorough investigation of the scene, corroborated Brody's account. The evidence was irrefutable. Eliza Monroe, the falsely accused outlaw, was finally, truly, free. The bounty was lifted, her name cleared. The fight was over, and they had won. But the victory came at a cost: a burned barn, a wounded hero, and the indelible scars of a battle fought for love and justice. Yet, standing there amidst the dawn, looking at Eliza and Hope, Jesse knew, without a shadow of a doubt, it was a price he would pay 1,000 times over. Their future, finally unburdened by fear, stretched before them, vast and full of promise. The weeks following the violent confrontation were a period of intense recovery and profound rebuilding. Jesse's shoulder wound, though painful, was not life-threatening, and with Eliza's tender care, it began to heal, a constant reminder of the night they had faced their greatest fears. The burned barn, a charred skeleton against the vast Montana sky, served as a stark testament to the battle, but also as a symbol of their resilience. Jesse, with Brody's help and the unexpected support of a few sympathetic ranchers from neighboring areas, immediately began the arduous task of clearing the debris and laying the foundation for a new, stronger structure. The community, though sparse, had heard whispers of the events, and while Eliza's past remained a delicate subject, her courage and Jesse's unwavering protection of his family had earned them a new level of respect and quiet admiration. Eliza, finally free from the crushing weight of being a hunted woman, shed the last vestiges of her fear. The shadow that had clung to her for so long dissipated entirely, replaced by a vibrant energy and a fierce sense of purpose. She worked tirelessly alongside Jesse, her hands roughened by labor, her spirit unbreakable. She was no longer just the woman he had rescued, she was his equal partner, his steadfast companion, and the beating heart of their growing family. Their love, forged in the crucible of desperation and strengthened by shared peril, deepened into an unwavering bond. They found profound comfort in simple moments: shared silences on the porch as the sun dipped below the mountains, the warmth of Eliza's hand in his as they walked the fields, the quiet laughter over Hope's latest antics. Jesse, once a man who measured his life by acres and livestock, now found his greatest wealth in the quiet companionship of his wife and the joyous chaos of his daughter. Hope, surprisingly resilient, seemed to emerge from the experience unaffected by the violence that had briefly touched their home. She quickly adapted to the rhythm of rebuilding, fascinated by the hammers and saws, her bright eyes observing every step of the process. She continued to blossom into a bright, inquisitive child, her laughter a constant melody in the reconstructed home. Eliza, now free to embrace her identity fully, began to actively engage in the small community, lending her gentle wisdom and surprising strength to those in need, becoming a beloved and respected figure. Her artistic talent, once a quiet solace, now flourished, her paintings capturing the vibrant energy of their new life, the rugged beauty of the land, and the tender moments of family. As the new barn slowly took shape, rising from the ashes stronger than before, Jesse realized he needed to make a gesture that solidified their future, a public declaration of his commitment and love. One crisp autumn evening, with the scent of pine and fresh-cut timber in the air, he took Eliza by the hand and led her to the partially completed barn, the framework standing tall and proud against the twilight sky. "Eliza," he began, his voice a little rough with emotion, "we built this together, just like we built our life. From nothing, we made something strong, something real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of raw cotton, was a simple, elegant silver ring, adorned with a single, small turquoise stone, a gift from his own mother. He knelt before her, his gaze unwavering, full of adoration. "Eliza Monroe, you came into my life a stranger, a woman with a bounty on her head, and you brought me more hope and love than I ever dared to dream of. You're the bravest, kindest woman I know. Will you do me the honor of being my wife? Of being my partner, forever, in this life we're building?" Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, glistening in the fading light. She looked at the ring, then at Jessie, her face radiant with emotion. "Oh, Jessie," she whispered, her voice choked. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. You're my home, you're my heart, and you gave me everything." He slid the ring onto her finger, its coolness a stark contrast to the warmth of her hand. They embraced, a profound silence settling around them, broken only by the soft brush of the wind through the tall pines. The setting sun cast long golden shadows across the new barn, a symbolic backdrop to their renewed vows, a promise of a future unburdened by fear, rich with love. They chose to marry quietly, a private ceremony on the ranch, with only Sheriff Brody and a few trusted neighbors as witnesses. It was a simple affair, but imbued with deep meaning, a testament to their journey. Eliza wore a dress she had sewn herself, adorned with wildflowers she had gathered from the fields. Jesse, dressed in his finest denim and a freshly pressed shirt, his hands steady and warm in hers, looked at her with an adoration that radiated from his very being. As they exchanged their vows, their voices clear and firm, the past seemed to melt away, leaving only the promise of a boundless future. Hope, dressed in a tiny white dress, toddled around their feet, her laughter a joyous affirmation of their union. As the years unfolded, the MC Allister Ranch became a beacon of quiet prosperity and enduring love. Hope grew into a vibrant, compassionate young woman, her spirit as free as the wild horses that roamed the distant hills. She inherited her father's practicality and her mother's artistic soul, a balanced blend that made her truly unique. She learned to ride with unmatched skill, to work the land with dedication, and to nurture the animals with gentle care. She was their pride, their joy, and the living legacy of their courage. Eliza continued to paint, her canvases filling their home with color and light. Her work gained wider recognition, her vivid portrayals of ranch life and the Montana landscape finding admirers far beyond their secluded valley. She became a pillar of the small community, her quiet strength and empathy drawing people to her, her past a distant whisper, eclipsed by the woman she had become. Jesse, his hair now streaked with silver, remained the steadfast heart of the ranch. He taught Hope everything he knew about the land, about honesty, and about resilience. He watched Eliza with an enduring love, marveling at the strength and beauty she brought into his once solitary world. Their life together was a testament to unconventional beginnings, to finding salvation in unexpected places, and to the transformative power of love. One warm summer evening, years after Hope had left for college, pursuing dreams of art and conservation, Jesse and Eliza sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. The new barn, sturdy and well-worn, stood proudly in the distance. Buster, now just a cherished memory, was long gone, but his spirit lingered in the quiet companionship they shared. "Remember that first night?" Eliza mused, her voice soft, filled with a gentle wonder. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left but fear and this baby." Jesse reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, the cool silver of her ring a familiar presence. "I remember," he said, his gaze sweeping over the vast, peaceful landscape they had built together. "I remember thinking my quiet life was about to be turned upside down. And it was." He paused, a genuine smile spreading across his face. In the best possible way. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. "You saved me, Jesse," she whispered. "You risked everything, and you gave me a life I never dared to dream of." He squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with profound affection. And you, Eliza, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you taught me what it truly means to live, to open my heart. You gave me hope, and a love that changed everything. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the valley into a soft, comforting twilight. Their story, born in the desperation of an outlaw's flight and the quiet courage of a cowboy's choice, had blossomed into a timeless tale of resilience, redemption, and a love that had defied all odds. The Montana plains, silent witnesses to their journey, stretched out before them, vast and eternal, a fitting backdrop to a life built on trust, commitment, and the boundless power of a love that had started with a pregnant stranger seeking refuge in a barn.